What would you do if the man you just married threw a plate at you on your wedding night? Would you walk away? Would you stay and try to understand? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Only it wasn't just a plate that shattered. It was everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the future we were supposed to build together. A stunned silence fell over the room as the plate shattered against the floor. My husband had thrown it aimed at me, though it barely missed. The sound of the crash rang louder than the vows we had exchanged just hours before. Gasps rippled through the wedding hall, but I couldn't move. My mind raced, my heart pounded, and my cheeks burned with a mixture of rage and humiliation. I locked eyes with him, hoping for regret, for an apology. Anything but his face was nothing but fury. For the first time, I saw a man I didn't recognize. My fingers gripped the edge of the table, my body trembling as I fought back tears. That night, I walked out, leaving my dress in a heap on the floor. I swore I'd never speak to him again, but the phone call I received the next day turned my world upside down. I had always believed in love, the kind that feels like home, where you laugh without fear and cry without judgment. That's what I thought I had found in Jasper. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was my best friend, my rock, the one who knew me better than anyone else. We met in college, bonding over late-night study sessions and cheap takeout. Over the years, we built a life together, piece by piece, dream by dream. When he proposed, it felt like the natural next step, like the next chapter in a story we had been writing all along. Our wedding day was meant to celebrate everything we had built. Friends and family filled the room, toasting to our future. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. Small arguments about finances, disagreements about priorities. I brushed them off, convinced they were just normal pre-wedding jitters. Then, at the reception, the unthinkable happened. We had argued over something trivial, like a misplaced seating card, but his anger escalated in a way I had never seen before. And when the plate flew, so did my world. I left that night, still in shock, replaying the moment over and over. Was this the man I had promised to spend my life with? Was this the love I had believed in so fiercely? Little did I know, the real turning point wasn't that night. It was the call I never expected the next day. The morning after the wedding, I woke up in a daze. My head throbbed, the emotions of the night before still echoing in my body. I had slept on my sister Willow's couch, the remnants of my wedding makeup smeared across my face. She handed me a cup of coffee, her expression full of concern. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I murmured, staring at the steam rising from my mug. My mind felt like a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could Jasper, the man I thought I knew so well, have acted this way? I replayed the scene in my head, the plate flying, his face twisted in rage, and the hushed murmurs of our guests as I stormed out. By mid-morning, the whispers had turned into rumors. Friends texted, trying to piece together what had happened. Social media was a minefield of wedding photos and well-meaning captions like, "What a beautiful night." The contrast made my stomach churn. Then, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Jasper. My hand hovered over the decline button, but something in me hesitated. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened to his message, his voice was shaky. "I know I messed up," he began. "Please, just let me explain. I need to see you." The nerve of him. After everything, he wanted me to hear him out? My anger flared anew. I decided I wouldn't answer. Instead, I began plotting a way to make him feel the pain I'd felt. I spent the next few days crafting my plan. He had humiliated me in front of everyone, so I wanted to return the favor. I envisioned showing up at his workplace, spilling everything to his colleagues, or maybe I'd share the story online, ensuring he'd never live it down. Each idea felt satisfying at first, but something gnawed at me. A small voice in the back of my mind asking, "What will this achieve?" Still, I silenced it. My pride demanded justice. One evening, as I scrolled through photos from the wedding, my anger deepened. There he was, smiling beside me in the earlier moments of the day, as if nothing was wrong. I felt like a fool. That's when I decided to confront him, not for closure, but to deliver the first blow of my revenge. I called him and agreed to meet at a quiet cafe. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked disheveled, his tie loosened, and his face pale. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his voice barely audible. I crossed my arms and stayed standing. "You've got 10 minutes. He sighed deeply and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know where to start, but I owe you an explanation. What happened that night?" He trailed off, his eyes clouding with shame. "I don't need excuses, Jasper," I snapped. "You threw a plate at me on our wedding day. That's not something you just apologize for and move on." His eyes widened. "I wasn't aiming at you, He stopped himself, taking a deep breath. "I know that doesn't make it okay. I lost control. I've been under so much pressure, work, the wedding, everything, and I just snapped." His words felt hollow, but there was a vulnerability in his tone I hadn't expected. Still, I wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "Pressure? What's your excuse? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me?" "I know," he said quietly, "and I hate myself for it. But there's more to it, Serafina. I've been struggling with something I didn't know how to tell you about." I froze. Struggling? What was he talking about? Jasper hesitated before continuing. "A few months ago, I started having these episodes, anger, frustration, like I couldn't control myself. It scared me, but I didn't want to burden you. I thought I could handle it on my own." I stared at him, trying to process his words. Was this genuine or just another excuse? "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice softer now. "I didn't want to ruin things," he admitted. "I thought if I just pushed through it, it would go away. But that night, it all came out in the worst possible way. I've been seeing someone, a therapist, to figure out what's going on." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Part of me wanted to scoff, to call him out for not trusting me sooner. But another part, the part that still cared, felt a pang of compassion. I left the cafe that day with a mind full of questions, my heart still raw and aching. The idea of revenge that had once felt so justified now seemed empty, like a hollow echo of the anger I couldn't let go of. Over the next week, I struggled to reconcile my feelings. On one hand, I was still devastated, still furious with him. On the other, there was the sincerity in Jasper's words, which refused to fade away. Could I really believe him? Could I ever consider forgiving him after everything? Willow became my rock during this time, my sounding board. "You don't owe him anything," she said, always the voice of reason. "But maybe it's not just about him. Maybe it's about what you need to move forward." Her words hit home, settling deep within me. What did I need? Revenge had seemed like the perfect answer at first, but the more I dwelled on it, the more it felt like a burden I wasn't willing to carry. I had to ask myself, did I want to be defined by my anger? Or could I find a way to rise above it? In the quiet moments of reflection, memories of my relationship with Jasper flooded back. I thought about how he'd been there for me during my mother's illness, how he'd stayed up with me, helping me study for my certification exam. These memories didn't erase the hurt, but they complicated my feelings. I realized my anger wasn't just about that night, the shattered plate, the humiliation. It was about a betrayal of trust, a feeling that the foundation of our relationship had cracked, leaving me questioning everything. If I wanted peace, I needed to address that, not through revenge, but through honesty. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and dialed Jasper's number. "Can we talk?" I asked, this time not seeking revenge, but answers and perhaps a way forward. We met at a park near my apartment. The air was crisp, and the scent of freshly fallen leaves filled the atmosphere. The distant sound of children playing added an odd sense of normalcy to what felt like a pivotal moment in my life. He stood by a bench, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders slumped. As I approached, he looked up, his eyes weighed down by exhaustion, and maybe a glimmer of hope. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice soft. I sat down, making sure to keep a safe distance. "This doesn't mean anything yet," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I need to understand not just what happened that night, but everything that led up to it." Jasper nodded, his jaw tightening as he took a deep breath. "You deserve that. I just hope you'll believe me." And then he spoke, slowly, carefully. He told me about the months before our wedding, how his job had been overwhelming him, the impossible demands, the panic attacks he'd been hiding, the sleepless nights. He admitted to feeling unworthy of me, convinced he was failing as a partner before we even began our life together. "It's not an excuse," he said, his voice breaking. "I let everything bottle up, and I lashed out in the worst way possible. I've been working with my therapist to understand why I let myself get to that point, to fix it. But I know I might never fix what I did to you." I sat in stunned silence. I had expected defenses, excuses, and maybe even deflection. Instead, he was taking full responsibility. No justifications, no blame shifting. For the first time since that night, I felt like I was seeing the Jasper I used to know. Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. "I'll sign the divorce papers," he said, his voice trembling. "If that's what you want, I won't fight you on it. But before we go there, I need you to know something." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Hesitant, I took it and opened it to find a handwritten letter. "It's from your mom," he said. My breath caught in my throat. My mom had passed away 2 years earlier, and her loss still felt like a raw wound. "How?" "She gave it to me a month before she died," Jasper explained. "She told me to hold on to it and give it to you when you needed it most. I know I've lost the right to decide that for you, but I think now might be the time." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. Her familiar handwriting blurred as tears filled my eyes. "My dearest Serafina, if you're reading this, it means you're facing something you feel you can't handle. I wish I could be there to hold your hand, but since I can't, let me remind you of something you've always known deep down. You're stronger than you think. Life will hurt you sometimes, in ways you can't imagine, but it's not the pain that defines you. It's what you do with it. Choose love, Serafina, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's courage. And no matter what happens, know that I believe in you." The letter ended there, but the words lingered, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. I folded the paper and looked at Jasper, who was watching me with cautious eyes. "You didn't have to do this," I whispered. He shook his head. "I owed it to you. I owed it to her. She believed in us, and I let her down. I let you down." Yet for the first time since that night, the anger inside me began to soften. It wasn't gone, but it no longer burned as fiercely. I realized that while Jasper had hurt me deeply, clinging to my rage wasn't healing the wound, it was keeping it open. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said, my voice steady, "but I'm willing to try. Not for you, or even for her, for me, because I need to let go of this anger if I'm ever going to move forward." Jasper's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. As we sat there, the heaviness of the past started to lift, replaced by something much lighter, an unfamiliar sense of hope. It wasn't resolution, not yet, but it was a small step toward healing. For the first time, I could almost believe that healing was possible. The days following our conversation were anything but easy. Healing isn't neat or smooth. It's messy, unpredictable, and often doesn't feel like healing at all. I spent hours reflecting on the words my mom had written and the discussion I'd had with Jasper. For so long, I had thought of forgiveness as excusing someone's actions, as letting them off the hook. But the letter my mom had given me reframed it. Forgiveness wasn't about making what happened okay. It was about choosing not to carry that weight with me any longer. I took a step I had been hesitant to take before. I started therapy, My therapist helped me unpack not just the events of that night, but also the years of small cracks in my relationship with Jasper. She encouraged me to recognize that, while his actions were wrong, they didn't define him or me. I wasn't weak for feeling conflicted, nor was I naive for wanting closure rather than revenge. Jasper and I agreed to limit our communication to therapy-facilitated sessions for a while. We both needed the space to heal individually before we could even consider what, if anything, might come next. In those sessions, I began to see parts of Jasper that I hadn't noticed before. He was vulnerable in ways I hadn't expected. He spoke about his childhood, the constant pressure to succeed, and the shame he carried for not being able to manage his emotions. He didn't ask for my forgiveness directly. He knew that was something I had to find on my own, but he expressed sincere regret for his actions and his commitment to change. For me, those sessions weren't about giving him another chance. They were about reclaiming my voice. I spoke honestly about the pain his actions had caused me and the trust he had shattered. Saying those things out loud, in a safe space, was both painful and liberating. Outside of therapy, I began to rebuild my life. I threw myself into my work, took up yoga, and reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. Willow continued to be my biggest support, always there with a cup of tea and a grounding perspective when I needed it. One afternoon, she said something that really stuck with me. "You know, you're stronger now than you were before all this happened, not because of him, but because you chose to face it head-on." Her words resonated deeply. The strength I was finding didn't come from the situation itself, but from how I chose to respond. I also started volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping others who had experienced emotional or physical abuse. Hearing their stories reminded me that healing is different for everyone. Some found closure by walking away and never looking back, while others found it by mending broken relationships. What mattered was that the choice was theirs, and now I knew the choice was mine. Months later, I ran into Jasper at a bookstore. It was an unexpected encounter, and it felt awkward at first. We hadn't seen each other outside of therapy sessions since that day in the park. He looked healthier, more grounded, and there was a calmness in him that hadn't been there before. We exchanged a few words, but there was no lingering tension, no uncomfortable silence. Just two people, standing in a moment of mutual understanding as different versions of who we once were. "Hi, Serafina," he said, his voice gentle. "How are you?" I hesitated before answering. "I'm better," I admitted. "How about you?" He nodded. "Same. Still working on myself, but it's getting easier." We ended up chatting for a while, sharing small updates about our lives. It felt oddly natural, like two old friends catching up. When we parted ways, I didn't feel the familiar sting of anger or sadness. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of peace. A few weeks later, during one of our final therapy sessions, the topic of our future came up. Jasper spoke first. "I don't expect anything from you, Serafina," he said, his tone earnest. "But I want you to know that I'm grateful for the chance to show you I could be better, even if it's too late for us." I took a deep breath, gathering the words I had rehearsed over and over in my mind. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about this," I began slowly. "And I've come to realize that forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to what we were. I forgive you, Jasper, because I need to free myself from the pain. But I believe it's best if we move forward separately." His eyes shimmered, but he nodded silently, understanding. "I get it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. That decision wasn't easy. It was heartbreaking, but it felt right. Forgiving Jasper didn't mean forgetting or excusing what had happened. It meant releasing the anger that had been consuming me, allowing myself to move forward with peace. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I moved into a new apartment, a space I could truly call my own. I filled it with plants, soft lighting, and furniture that felt comforting. The solitude, while lonely at times, became an opportunity for self-discovery. I rediscovered passions I'd left behind, like journaling. Writing became my therapy, a way to work through the emotions I had been bottling up, and also a way to reflect on how far I'd come. I wrote about my anger, my pain, and, over time, my gratitude for the lessons I had learned. One evening, I found myself reading my mom's letter again. Her words felt even more profound now than they did that day in the park. I realized that choosing love, as she had advised, didn't mean staying in a toxic relationship. It meant loving myself enough to walk away. It meant allowing Jasper to find his own path to healing, separate from mine. Letting go of the grudge didn't erase the past. It didn't erase the hurt or the betrayal, but it changed how I carried it. I no longer saw myself as a victim of what had happened. Instead, I saw myself as someone who had faced something deeply painful and had emerged stronger. Jasper and I lost contact after that final session, but through mutual friends, I learned that he continued his therapy and eventually began mentoring others struggling with anger issues. Hearing that he was trying to make amends in his own way gave me a sense of closure. As for me, I began writing a blog about resilience and forgiveness. I shared my journey with the hope of helping others who might be facing similar heartbreak. The responses I received from women who had experienced their own pain and found strength in it reminded me that our stories have the power to heal not only ourselves, but also others. In the end, the greatest act of revenge wasn't about hurting Jasper or making him pay for his actions. It was about choosing to heal, to forgive, and to build a life that felt whole again. My mom was right. Forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was courage. And in choosing it, I found a peace I never thought possible. Forgiveness isn't just a gift we give to others. It's a gift we give ourselves. Letting go of anger doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means choosing freedom over bitterness, healing over hurt. My journey taught me that while pain can shape us, it doesn't have to define us. We all face moments when we have to decide whether to hold on or let go. It's never easy, but letting go can transform our lives in ways we never imagined. What about you? Have you ever been in a situation where forgiveness seemed impossible but ended up being exactly what you needed? Or have you found strength in letting go of a grudge? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Your journey could inspire someone else to take their first step toward healing. Let's start a conversation about courage, growth, and the power of letting go. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads where holding on to anger seemed easier than forgiving, but you realized that letting go was the only way to move forward? What if forgiveness wasn't just about the other person, but about your own healing? Serafina's wedding day ended in chaos when her husband, Jasper, threw a plate at her during an argument, shattering the perfect image she had of their future. In the days that followed, anger and betrayal clouded her judgment, tempting her toward revenge. However, after a heartfelt conversation with Jasper and a letter from her late mother, Serafina found herself reconsidering the path of forgiveness. Through therapy, reflection, and support from her sister Willow, she realized that forgiveness was not about excusing Jasper's actions, but about freeing herself from the weight of anger. Ultimately, Serafina chose peace, not revenge, and learned to move forward with a newfound sense of strength. From a perspective of emotional resilience, this story highlights the internal struggle many people face when confronted with deep hurt. Serafina's journey is a testament to the power of emotional self-care and the importance of self-forgiveness. Her decision not to retaliate, but to focus on healing, reveals how revenge often weighs us down more than the original betrayal. The story also challenges the idea that forgiveness means reconciliation. It doesn't necessarily mean returning to the old relationship, but rather creating space for personal growth and healing. In this case, the true strength came from the ability to choose peace over bitterness, a decision that required far more courage than lashing out. What would you do if the person who hurt you deeply asked for forgiveness, but you knew that offering it would mean letting go of your pride and anger? Could you find peace without making them pay for what they did? Have you ever struggled with the decision to forgive someone who hurt you? Or have you found strength in letting go of a grudge, even when it seemed impossible? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else take that first step toward healing. Let's talk about the power of forgiveness and the courage it takes to move on.
I wasn't meant to overhear the conversation that would change everything. Standing outside my father's study, I froze at the sound of my name, my hand still raised to knock. Through the gap in the door, I could see my sister Sarah perched on the leather armchair. Her perfect posture a stark contrast to her husband Jackson's lounging stance beside her. "Alara's college fund is the most practical solution," my father said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of finality. "The art school tuition would have been wasted anyway." My mother's bangles clinked as she gestured. "Conrad's right. Sarah's business plan is solid. This investment could secure both your futures." I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself, the cool surface grounding me as my world tilted sideways. The fund I'd spent years building through summer jobs and careful saving. Gone just like that. "Are you sure she'll understand?" Sarah's voice held a note of concern that might have fooled someone who didn't know her better. "I mean, she's been talking about that art school forever." "Your sister will adjust," my father replied. "She always does." I pushed the door open, making them all jump. "Were you planning to tell me, or would I have found out when my tuition check bounced?" "Alara." My mother stood, smoothing her silk blouse. "We were going to discuss this with you properly." "When?" "After you'd already signed everything over to Sarah." Jackson straightened, flashing that practiced smile. "Look, kid, sometimes in business you have to make tough decisions. Your sister's startup has real potential. Don't call me kid." I turned to my father, who remained behind his desk, expression unchanging. "This is my money. I worked for it." "A portion of it, yes," he said. "But the bulk came from family funds, which I have the authority to reallocate as needed. Sarah's venture is a sound investment. Your art, it's a hobby, Alara. It's time to be realistic." The familiar ache of being the family disappointment twisted in my chest. Realistic? Like Sarah's 3 failed businesses were realistic? Or maybe like Jackson's can't-miss cryptocurrency scheme last year? "That's enough." My father's voice sharpened. "The decision is made. Perhaps this will motivate you to consider a more practical career path." Sarah stood, reaching for my arm. "Oh, please. I promise once the business takes off." I jerked away from her touch. "Save it. You've always been really good at promises, Sarah." "Following through? Not so much." My mother stepped forward, arms outstretched. "Darling, please try to understand. Family has to support each other." "Support?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Is that what you call this?" I backed toward the door, taking in their faces one last time. My father's stern disapproval, my mother's practiced concern. Sarah's perfect mask of sisterly worry, and Jackson's barely concealed smirk. In that moment, I saw them all clearly for the first time. "You know what? Keep the money. All of it. But remember this moment, because things are going to change. And when they do, don't expect me to understand or support or adjust. Not anymore." I turned and walked out, ignoring my mother's calls. As I climbed the stairs to my room, my grandmother's words from last week echoed in my mind. Sometimes the worst betrayals come gift-wrapped in family loyalty. I hadn't understood then. I did now. Grandmother Miriam's Victorian house smelled like oil paints and coffee when I arrived with my hastily packed bags. She took one look at my face and wordlessly pulled me into her studio, where an empty canvas waited on the easel. "Paint it out," she said, pressing a brush into my hand. "I'll make us some tea." I stared at the white expanse until colors began flowing, dark reds and blacks, angry strokes that barely resembled anything. I was halfway through when the doorbell rang. Sarah's voice drifted up from downstairs, and my brush froze mid-stroke. "Alara?" Miriam called. "Your sister's here." Should I send her up? I wiped my hands on my paint-stained jeans. Might as well get it over with. Sarah appeared in the doorway, perfectly put together as always in her designer outfit. "You're being dramatic, Elle. Running away to Grandma's like we're in some teen movie." "Dramatic." I turned back to my canvas, adding another slash of red. "That's rich, coming from the queen of drama herself. I came to talk sense into you." She perched on the window seat, wrinkling her nose at the paint fumes. "Dad's furious. Mom's beside herself. Just come home, apologize, and we can work something out." "Work something out?" The brush clattered as I dropped it. "Like how you worked out taking my college fund. That money is going to benefit all of us," she insisted. "Jackson has connections. This business venture." "Stop." I faced her fully. "Just stop pretending this is about family. You saw an opportunity and took it, just like always. The golden child gets whatever she wants." Something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or fear. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Dad's expectations, Jackson's plans." "You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how my sister could steal my future and act like she's doing me a favor. It's not stealing if. If what? If Dad approves? If it serves the mighty Winslow family legacy. I grabbed a rag, wiping paint from my hands with sharp, angry motions. Did you even think about me at all? Sarah stood, smoothing her skirt. Of course I did. I thought about how you're wasting your potential on this. She gestured at my paintings. Art doesn't pay bills, Elle. I'm trying to build something real. Real? I laughed. Like your boutique that lasted 3 months? Or that wellness coaching scam you tried last year? Those were learning experiences, she snapped, her perfect facade cracking. And at least I'm trying to make something of myself, not hiding in Grandma's attic playing with paints. Get out. Elle. Get out. She reached for her purse, then paused. You know what your problem is? You're so busy feeling sorry for yourself that you can't see opportunities right in front of you. Join the business. Work with me and Jackson. Be part of something bigger then. Then what? Than my childish dreams. I picked up my brush again, turning to the canvas. The answer is no. Now leave before I paint you into this mess, though you might actually look better in abstract. I heard her heels clicking away, then Miriam's voice downstairs, too low to make out the words. When the front door finally closed, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Miriam appeared in the doorway, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. Well, that sounded productive. She hasn't changed since we were kids, I said, accepting the tea. Still thinks she can smile and manipulate her way through anything. Miriam studied my painting, head tilted. Interesting use of red. Very violent. That's how betrayal feels. I touched the wet paint, letting it stain my fingertip. But I'm done being the family doormat. I'm going to find a way to make this work. My way. Good. Miriam smiled, a glint in her eye I'd never seen before. Because I have a proposition for you. Miriam's proposition turned out to be more explosive than I'd imagined. She'd handed me a manila envelope containing bank statements, loan documents, and emails. A paper trail that painted a devastating picture of my family's true financial state. Your father's company is hemorrhaging money, Miriam said as I spread the documents across her kitchen table. Has been for years. Those society parties, Sarah's failed ventures, your mother's spending habits, it's all smoke and mirrors. I stared at the numbers, my hands shaking. How did you get these? I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I've been watching Jackson since the day he married your sister. She tapped a document showing recent transfers. See these? Your college fund wasn't invested in Sarah's business. It went straight to covering margin calls on some very risky investments. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Does Sarah know? I doubt it. She's too busy playing entrepreneur to notice she's being played. Miriam poured more coffee into my cup. Jackson's been systematically draining your family's resources, using Sarah's name to access accounts. Taking advantage of your father's desperation to maintain appearances. A text lit up my phone. Sarah, again. Need to talk. Important. Meet me at Café Laurent. Go, Miriam said, reading over my shoulder. But remember what you know now. The cafe was crowded when I arrived, but I spotted Sarah immediately, her perfect posture a beacon of privilege even here. She wasn't alone. Jackson sat beside her, his arm draped possessively across her shoulders. Elle, thanks for coming. Sarah's smile was brittle. We wanted to discuss your future. My future? I settled into the chair across from them, noting how Jackson's fingers drummed against the table, a tell I'd noticed whenever he was working an angle. We've been talking, he said, leaning forward, and we think we can help you. There's a position opening up in our new venture. Entry-level, but with real potential. What kind of position? Administrative assistant, Sarah jumped in. You'd be working directly with me, learning the business from the ground up. I took a slow sip of water, remembering the documents spread across Miriam's table. And what business is that, exactly? We're acquiring distressed properties, Jackson said smoothly. Renovating them for profit. Your artistic eye could be valuable for the design aspects. Interesting timing, I said, considering the real estate market's current state. Something flickered in Jackson's eyes, surprise, maybe concern. What do you mean? Just that property values in this area have dropped significantly. Seems risky. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. How would you know about? I've been doing research. I cut in, watching Jackson's fingers drum faster. Lots of research. Look, kid. Jackson's voice hardened slightly. This is a legitimate opportunity. But if you're not interested... Oh, I'm interested. I stood, placing my palms flat on the table. I'm interested in how you convinced my father to sink his company's emergency reserves into your schemes. I'm interested in where my college fund really went. And I'm really interested in what the SEC would think about your creative accounting. Sarah's face went pale. Elle, what are you talking about? Ask your husband. I grabbed my bag. Or better yet, ask Dad why he's been selling off assets to cover Jackson's losses. You don't know what you're dealing with, Jackson warned, all pretense gone. Neither do you. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sarah? You might want to check those joint accounts you opened. The ones Jackson insisted would simplify your finances? I'd do it soon. Very soon. Walking away, I heard Sarah's confused questions and Jackson's increasingly defensive responses. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time since that day in my father's study, I felt powerful. Miriam was right. Knowledge wasn't just power, it was ammunition. The fallout came faster than I expected. 3 days after the cafe confrontation, I found Sarah on Miriam's doorstep at midnight, mascara streaking her cheeks. Behind her sat 2 designer suitcases. He cleaned out our accounts, she said, voice cracking. Everything's gone. I let her in, watching her collapse onto Miriam's antique sofa. When? This morning. I went to buy coffee and my card was declined. She laughed, a hollow sound. Can you believe that? I couldn't even buy coffee. Miriam appeared in her silk robe, taking in the scene. I'll make tea. I don't want tea, Sarah snapped, then immediately deflated. I'm sorry, Grandma. I don't know what to do. I perched on the armchair, studying my sister. The perfect mask had cracked, revealing something I'd never seen before, fear. Did you talk to Dad? He won't take my calls. Sarah twisted her wedding ring. Mom says he's handling it, whatever that means. But I heard her crying in the bathroom. Miriam returned with 3 steaming mugs and a folder. Perhaps it's time we showed her, Alara. I hesitated, but Sarah was already reaching for the documents. As she read, her face went from pale to ashen. This can't be right, she whispered. Dad's company. Our house. Everything. Jackson's been planning this for years, I said. You were just his way in. She looked up sharply. You knew. You knew and you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? I met her gaze. When have you ever believed anything that didn't fit your perfect narrative? Girls, Miriam interrupted softly. The past won't help us now. We need to focus on what comes next. What comes next? Sarah's laugh was bitter. My husband's gone, my money's gone, our family's falling apart. What could possibly come next? I stood, walking to the window. Outside, the city lights blurred in the rain. We could let it all burn down. Watch Jackson destroy everything and walk away with the ashes. Or, Sarah's voice was small, or we fight back. I turned to face them. But if we do this, we do it my way. No more family politics, no more golden child versus black sheep. Just truth. Your way. Sarah set down her tea. What does that mean? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The image that appeared made my blood run cold. A photo of my art school application, sitting on what was clearly Jackson's desk. He's at the house, I said. In Dad's study. Sarah stood, peering at the phone. Why would he? Because he knows we have evidence against him. I deleted the message. He's looking for the originals. But why your art school application? Because that's not all it is. I met Miriam's knowing gaze. The application was a cover. I've been gathering proof, building a case. Everything's hidden in plain sight, disguised as portfolio pieces and essays. Sarah sank back down. You've been planning this? I learned from the best. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. You taught me well, sis. Always have a backup plan, right? The silence stretched between us until Miriam cleared her throat. The question isn't what Alara's been planning. The question is, are you ready to help her, Serafina? Sarah looked from me to Miriam, then back to the documents in her lap. Finally, she slipped off her wedding ring and placed it on the coffee table. Tell me what you need me to do. First, I said, you need to understand something. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about justice. And justice isn't always pretty. Neither is family, Miriam added quietly. But here we are. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and I watched my sister's reflection in the window, wondering if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, or finally set things right. The art school acceptance letter arrived the same morning as the news about Dad's arrest. I stood in Miriam's kitchen, clutching both pieces of paper, while Sarah paced behind me. Securities fraud, she read from her phone. Embezzlement. Dad's face is all over the financial news. She paused. Jackson's name isn't mentioned anywhere. Of course not. I set down the acceptance letter. He made sure Dad would take the fall. The police are at the house, Miriam said, hanging up her phone. Your mother's hysterical. They're seizing computers, files. My portfolio. The realization hit like ice water. All the evidence is hidden in my artwork at the house. Sarah grabbed her keys. I'll drive. We arrived to find police cars lining our circular driveway. Mom stood on the front steps in her silk robe, mascara streaking her face as officers carried boxes past her. When she saw us, her expression hardened. You, she pointed at me. This is your fault. If you hadn't started digging. If I hadn't started digging, Jackson would have taken everything anyway. I pushed past her, heading for the stairs. An officer blocked my path. Sorry, miss. This is an active crime scene. My art supplies are upstairs. Personal items. You can't just. Actually, we can. A man in a suit appeared, badge glinting. Especially since several of those art pieces contain financial documents hidden in the frames. The room went silent. Mom's hand flew to her throat. What is he talking about, Alara? Ask your son-in-law, I said. He figured it out before you did. Miss Winslow, the detective continued, we'd like you to come downtown to answer some questions. Sarah stepped forward. She's not going anywhere without a lawyer. Interesting you should mention lawyers. He consulted his notebook. Your husband came to us this morning with quite a story. Claims your sister here has been stealing company documents, manipulating evidence. That's ridiculous, Miriam snapped. Is it? Mom's voice was ice. She's always been jealous of Sarah's success. Always trying to prove something. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make them all flinch. Success? Is that what we're calling it now? Your golden child married a con man who just destroyed our family. But sure, let's talk about my jealousy. Ladies, the detective interrupted. We can continue this discussion downtown. Wait. Sarah pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. Check your email, detective. You'll find recordings of every conversation between Jackson and his partners for the past 3 months, including the one where he planned to frame my father. The detective's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen. I may have been blind, Sarah continued, but I'm not stupid. Once Alara showed me the truth, I started gathering my own evidence. Mom sank onto the stairs. Sarah, what have you done? The right thing. Finally. She turned to the detective. There's more where that came from. But first, my sister gets immunity. And we need access to her artwork. The real evidence is there, not whatever forgeries Jackson planted. The detective studied us both, then nodded to his officers. Let them upstairs. Supervised. As we climbed the stairs, I whispered to Sarah, why didn't you tell me about the recordings? You're not the only one who can play chess. She squeezed my hand. Besides, some of us learned manipulation at Mom's knee. In my room, I went straight to the large canvas hanging above my bed. My first abstract piece, layers of paint hiding a wealth of damning documents. As I reached for it, Sarah touched my arm. The acceptance letter, she said quietly. What are you going to do? I stared at the painting, seeing beyond the surface to the truth it concealed. First, we take down Jackson. Then I paint my own future. The detective cleared his throat behind us. Time's running out, ladies. No, I said, carefully lifting the canvas from the wall. It's just beginning. 6 months after Dad's arrest. I stood in the gallery surrounded by my work. Paintings that had once hidden evidence now stripped bare and reimagined. The exhibition was my triumph, my declaration of independence. Until I saw them walk in. Mom, wearing her society smile like armor. Dad out on bail, looking smaller in his off-the-rack suit. And between them, Jackson, radiating smug confidence despite the pending investigations. Quite a turnout, he said, approaching my featured piece. A massive canvas of fractured family photographs, distorted and bleeding into chaos. Though I'm surprised they let you keep the originals, considering their evidence. These are new works, I said, keeping my voice steady. The originals are with the FBI. About that. He lowered his voice. Your father's lawyer thinks a deal might be possible. Drop the charges, return certain documents. The family could be whole again. Is that why you're here? To threaten me? To make peace? Mom stepped forward, her perfume too strong in the crowded space. Darling, hasn't this gone far enough? Your father's reputation was destroyed by him. I nodded toward Jackson. Or did you forget who orchestrated everything? Actually, Dad spoke for the first time. Jackson's been instrumental in organizing my defense. He's found investors willing to help rebuild. A laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. You still don't get it, do you? He's playing you just like before. Where do you think those investors' money will really go? That's enough. Mom gripped my arm. You're making a scene. Good. I pulled away. It's about time someone did. Think carefully, Alara. Jackson's smile never reached his eyes. Your scholarship, your place in this gallery. Everything can disappear so easily. Ask your sister. My blood froze. What about Sarah? Haven't you heard? She's been having such a difficult time lately. Stress, anxiety. These things can be dangerous in her condition. Before I could respond, Miriam appeared beside me. I believe it's time for you all to leave. Mother. Mom started, but Miriam cut her off. Now, Lillian. Before I call security, or better yet, the detective handling Jackson's case. They left, but Jackson lingered. Beautiful work, truly. Especially that one. He pointed to a small piece in the corner. The only painting that wasn't part of the main exhibition. Sarah always said you had a gift for capturing hidden things. After they were gone, I rushed to the painting he'd indicated. It was an old piece, one I'd done years ago of Sarah in the garden. But something was wrong. The texture was different, the strokes too precise. It's not mine, I whispered. This isn't my painting. Miriam examined it closely. Look at the signature. In the corner, barely visible. Not my usual signature, but a date and time. Tomorrow, midnight. He switched it, I said. He's been in the gallery. Which means the evidence in your other paintings might not be safe either. Miriam's face was grim. Call Sarah. But Sarah didn't answer. Her phone went straight to voicemail, just like it had for the past week. I thought she'd been avoiding me because of the exhibition. Now, he has her. I said, the reality crushing down. That's what he meant about her condition. He knows she's pregnant, and he's using it against us. What are you going to do? I stared at the painting, at the hidden message meant to lure me into what was obviously a trap. Everything I'd worked for was in this gallery. My future, my freedom, my revenge. But Sarah, I'm going to meet him, I said. And this time, one of us isn't walking away. Miriam touched my arm. You know it's a trap. Yes. I pulled out my phone, dialing the detective's number. That's counting on it. The old boathouse loomed dark against the midnight sky, its weathered boards creaking in the wind off the lake. I approached slowly, phone recording in my pocket, wire uncomfortable against my skin. The detective's words echoed in my head. Don't engage. Just get him talking. Sarah's voice drifted out through the broken windows, weak but alive. Alara, don't. Shut up. Jackson's sharp command cut her off. Come in, sister dear. Family reunion time. I pushed open the door. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating Sarah tied to a chair, her face tear-streaked but defiant. Jackson stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding something I couldn't quite see. The police are coming, I said. Of course they are. He smiled. But they won't find anything here except a tragic accident. Two sisters fighting over family secrets. Maybe one falls into the lake. Maybe both. You really think anyone will believe that? They believed everything else. His grip tightened on Sarah's shoulder. Your father believed I was his savior. Your mother believed I could restore their reputation. Even you believed your little evidence collection would work. Sarah's voice shook. The paintings in the gallery, he switched them all. The real ones are. In a much safer place, Jackson finished. Insurance, let's call it. Now about those FBI files. I don't have them. Don't lie to me. His composure cracked. I know how you work. Hidden compartments, secret panels, you wouldn't trust anyone else to keep them. A floorboard creaked behind me. I didn't turn. You're right. I wouldn't trust anyone else. That's why I gave them to Sarah weeks ago. Jackson laughed. Nice try. But she's been with me. For the past week, Sarah interrupted, strength returning to her voice. But not before that. Not when Alara showed me what you really are. Not when I started recording everything. His face contorted. You're bluffing. The necklace you gave me for our anniversary? Sarah smiled through her tears. Amazing what they can hide in jewelry these days. Every conversation, every threat, every plan, all transmitted directly to my private server. Which the FBI now has access to, I added. Check your phone, Jackson. Breaking news should be hitting right about now. He pulled out his phone with his free hand. As he read, his face drained of color. That's impossible. The accounts were untraceable. Unless you know where to look. Miriam stepped out of the shadows, her cane tapping against the wooden floor. Did you really think you were the first person to try this scheme? I've been protecting this family from men like you for longer than you've been alive. Jackson's hand moved, metal glinting in the moonlight. Stay back. Or what? I took a step forward. You'll shoot us all. Add murder to your fraud charges? You don't understand, he snarled. I built this. Everything I took, I earned. You people with your privilege, your connections, you never appreciated. The gun went off as Sarah threw herself sideways, chair and all. I lunged forward. We crashed together, the gun skittering across the floor. Outside, sirens wailed. You're right, I gasped, pinning him down. We never appreciated what we had. But you taught us something valuable. Yeah, he struggled, but Sarah's recordings had made him sloppy, desperate. What's that? Family isn't about blood or money. I met Sarah's eyes as the police burst in. It's about who you choose to protect. As they led him away, Sarah gripped my hand. I'm sorry. For everything. I know. I helped her up, watching Miriam direct the officers to gather evidence. We both have a lot to make up for. Where do we start? By telling the truth. All of it. Together. 1 year later, I stood in Miriam's studio, helping her sort through old paintings. My latest exhibition had just closed. A series exploring family bonds, healing, and forgiveness that had earned critical acclaim. But this moment, quietly working beside my grandmother, felt more significant than any gallery opening. Found something interesting, Miriam said, pulling a leather-bound journal from behind a stack of canvases. I think it's time you read it. The journal was my grandfather's, a man I'd never met. As I read, my hands trembled. Page after page detailed a familiar story. Family manipulation, financial deceit, broken trust. But it wasn't just a record of pain. It was a blueprint for healing, written in my grandmother's careful annotations in the margins. You knew, I said. All along, you knew this would happen. History has a way of repeating itself. Miriam settled into her favorite chair. But so does strength. The doorbell rang. Sarah entered, her baby bump now visible beneath her simple dress. No more designer labels or perfect poses, just my sister, real and raw and trying. Dad's sentence came through, she said without preamble. 5 years with possibility of parole. I nodded, unsurprised. And Mom? Still in denial. But she's seeing a therapist. Sarah managed a small smile. Baby steps. Speaking of babies, I gestured to the corner where my newest painting stood covered. I finished it. Sarah pulled back the sheet, revealing a portrait of her surrounded by swirling colors. Not the perfect society daughter she'd once been, but the complex, flawed, resilient woman she was becoming. Tears welled in her eyes. It's beautiful, she whispered. But I don't deserve. It's not about deserving. I touched the canvas where the colors merged and separated. It's about becoming. Miriam cleared her throat. There's something else you both should see. She opened the journal to its final pages. Your grandfather didn't just document his struggles. He left something for the future. We read together, details of hidden accounts, investments made decades ago, grown steady and strong like roots beneath the surface. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough for art school, enough for a fresh start, enough for a baby's future. He knew someday the family would need a reset, Miriam explained. A chance to build something new from the ashes of the old. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Sarah asked. Because you needed to find your own strength first. Miriam stood, touching each of our faces in turn. Money without wisdom is what got us here in the first place. Later, as sunset painted Miriam's studio in shades of gold, I added my own entry to the journal. Not about revenge or justice, but about the harder path of reconstruction. About how sometimes the deepest wounds become the strongest bonds. About how family isn't just what you're born into, but what you choose to build. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Jackson's sentencing is next week. Will you come with me? Of course. I closed the journal. But first, I need your help with something. I'm starting an art program for at-risk youth. Kids who need to find their voice. Like we did. Like we're still doing. I smiled. Want to help teach them how to paint their own stories? She picked up a brush, turning it thoughtfully. I think I'd like that. As we began clearing space for the new project, I caught Miriam watching us, satisfaction in her eyes. She'd known all along that true revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about creation. About taking broken pieces and making something beautiful, something true, something that would last. I always thought birthdays were supposed to be special. Instead, I'm standing in our kitchen, holding a hastily scrawled note that makes my hands shake. The morning light streams through the window, highlighting the empty coffee cup in the sink, Mom's favorite. The one with little painted daisies around the rim. Kella, honey. Victor and I need a fresh start. There's food in the fridge, and I left some cash in the drawer. You're almost 18 now, old enough to understand. Take care of yourself. Love, Mom. The words blur as I read them again. And again. My phone buzzes, probably Jasper with his annual midnight strike birthday message. I can't look at it. Can't move. The house feels different already, like someone sucked all the air out of it. I drift through the rooms, touching familiar things that suddenly feel foreign. Mom's reading glasses on the side table. Victor's Wall Street Journal from yesterday. Everything exactly where it should be, except them. The cash in the drawer turns out to be $300. $300 for 17 years of being her daughter. I stuff it in my pocket, not sure if I'm more angry or hurt. My phone buzzes again. This time I answer. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Grandma Eloise's voice fills my ear. I'm making your favorite chocolate cake. You're coming over later, right? I swallow hard. Gran, can I come now? There must be something in my voice because she doesn't hesitate. Of course. Is everything okay? No. The word comes out smaller than I meant it to. Mom and Victor are gone. The silence on the other end stretches for 3 heartbeats. I'm coming to get you. Don't move. I can drive. Cala Rose Martinez, you stay right there. I'll be there in 15 minutes. While I wait, I find myself in Mom's room. Her closet is half empty, designer clothes gone but cheaper ones left behind. Like she cherry-picked her new life, leaving the unwanted parts, including me, scattered on the floor. The jewelry box on her dresser catches my eye. Inside, I find the silver locket Dad gave her before he died. She always said she lost it years ago. Another lie to add to the pile. Grandma arrives in 12 minutes, not 15. She takes one look at me and pulls me into a hug that smells like vanilla and safety. When she releases me, her eyes are fierce. Pack a bag, she says. You're staying with me. Gran, I can manage. Pack. Bag. Each word is carefully measured. There's something you need to know, but not here. Not in this house. Something in her tone makes me look up sharply. What do you mean? She picks up the note from the counter, reads it, then crumples it in her fist. Your mother. She starts, then stops herself. Pack first. Talk later. As I throw clothes into a duffel bag, I find another note tucked into my dresser drawer. This one's older, the paper yellowed. It's addressed to me, and I recognize the handwriting from the birthday cards I used to receive. From my father's parents. The grandparents' mom always said wanted nothing to do with me. I stuff the unopened note into my pocket next to the cash. Whatever's in it, whatever Gran needs to tell me, it can wait until we're out of this house that suddenly feels like a museum of lies. In the driveway, Gran takes my bag and fixes me with a look that's part sympathy, part determination. Ready? I glance back at the house one last time. Yeah, I say, though I'm not sure what I'm ready for. Let's go. Gran's kitchen always smells like home. But today the familiar scent of baking bread does nothing to settle my nerves. The unopened letter from my father's parents burns in my pocket as Gran sets a steaming mug of tea in front of me. Your mother, she says carefully, has been keeping things from you. Important things. Before she can continue, the doorbell rings. Gran's expression shifts from concern to something I can't quite read. That would be them. Them. Your other grandparents, Calla. Lionel and Marjorie. My heart stutters. I pull the crumpled letter from my pocket, suddenly understanding why Gran insisted we come straight here. The elderly couple that walks into the kitchen looks exactly like the photos Mom told me were just old family friends. Marjorie reaches for me, then stops herself. Oh, sweetheart. You look just like James. Dad. She means Dad. The room spins a little. We've been trying to reach you for years, Lionel says, his voice rough. Every birthday, every Christmas. Mom said you didn't want. The words die in my throat as Gran places a stack of envelopes on the table. Dozens of them, all addressed to me, all in the same handwriting as the letter in my hands. Found these in Serafina's closet last month when I was helping her organize, Gran says quietly. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. My fingers trace the return address on the nearest envelope. Why would she? Money, Lionel says flatly. Your father left you everything. The house, his investments, a trust fund for college. Serafina was supposed to be the trustee until you turned 18, but Victor convinced her to use it differently. Marjorie finishes, her gentle tone at odds with the steel in her eyes. The room goes very still. I think about the designer clothes missing from Mom's closet, Victor's new car, the vacations they took without me. How much? Nearly all of it, Lionel says. We've been watching through our lawyer, but couldn't do anything without proof of mismanagement. Now that they've abandoned you. My phone buzzes. Jasper again. I silence it, my hand shaking. The house, our house, was Dad's. Gran nods. In your name. They've been living there rent-free, using your money to what? Finance their fresh start. The bitterness in my voice surprises even me. I finally open the letter from my pocket, the paper soft from years of handling. Inside, there's a photo of Dad holding me as a baby, his smile so much like mine it hurts. We have a room ready, Marjorie says softly. At our house. If you want it. No pressure, but... She's staying with me, Gran interrupts, then softens. For now. Until we sort this out. My phone buzzes again. This time it's a text from an unknown number. Happy birthday, sweetie. The house is yours now. Do what you want with it. Just don't try to find us. Mom. I show them the message. Lionel's face darkens, but Marjorie reaches across the table and takes my hand. We can help you fight this, Calla. If you want. Fight. The word tastes strange in my mouth. For your inheritance. Your future. Everything they took. I look at the photo of Dad again, then at the pile of unopened letters, years of attempted connection stolen from me. The anger that bubbles up isn't hot like I expected. It's cold, clarifying. Yes, I say, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounds. I want to fight. Gran squeezes my shoulder. Then we'll fight. Together. I nod, already thinking about the house, my house, and everything else they tried to take. Mom and Victor wanted a fresh start? Fine. But they're about to learn that fresh starts come with a price. The key feels heavier than it should as I unlock the front door of my house, Dad's house. My house. Jasper stands behind me, his presence steady and familiar in a world that keeps shifting under my feet. You don't have to do this today, he says. But I do. It's been 3 days since Mom's text and I need answers. The house is exactly as we left it, except for the thin layer of dust that's settled over everything. I head straight for Victor's home office, the one room that was always off limits. Help me look, I tell Jasper, pulling open the first drawer of Victor's desk. Bank statements, letters, anything that might. Kaya. Jasper's voice stops me. He's standing by the bookshelf, holding something that glints in the afternoon light. A key, small and golden, hanging from a leather cord I recognize from Mom's jewelry box. Where did you find that? Behind these books. He pulls out a volume, revealing a hollow space. There's more. The space contains a stack of papers and a small notebook. My hands shake as I open it, recognizing Mom's handwriting. Dates, amounts, account numbers. Years of transactions, all carefully documented in her neat script. She knew, I whisper. She kept track of everything they took. Jasper reads over my shoulder. Look at these amounts. They weren't just using your trust fund for living expenses. They were. Gambling. The word tastes bitter. I recognized the names of casinos, online betting sites. Victor was gambling with my inheritance. A floorboard creaks behind us. I spin around to find Gran in the doorway, her face grim. I thought I might find you here. Did you know? I hold up the notebook. About the gambling? She shakes her head. Not everything. But I suspected Victor had other motives for marrying your mother. The way he pushed her to move into this house, to take control of your trust. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have believed me? Her voice is gentle. Your mother was so convinced he was saving her. Saving both of you. And then I found those letters. My phone buzzes. Another unknown number, but I know who it is before I answer. The house better be exactly as we left it. Victor's voice cold and controlled. Your mother's worried sick about you, by the way. Though I told her you're old enough to handle yourself now. Like you handled my trust fund? The words slip out before I can stop them. The silence that follows is deadly. What did you say? I found Mom's notebook. The gambling debts, the... Listen carefully, he cuts me off. Your mother made certain choices to protect you. To give you a better life. If you push this, if you try to come after us legally, those choices might come back to haunt her. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think about Mom's careful documentation, years of tracking every dollar they took. Was she protecting herself or gathering evidence? Perfectly, I say and hang up. Jasper touches my arm. What are you thinking? I look at Gran, then back at the notebook in my hands. I'm thinking Mom left me more than just a house. She left me a weapon. Calla, Gran starts, but I cut her off. He threatened her. Just now on the phone. Whatever hold he has on her. I flip through the notebook's pages, seeing the story they tell. She knew this day might come. She kept records. Evidence. It's not just about the money anymore, is it? Jasper asks quietly. I shake my head, thinking of Mom's handwriting, each careful entry a cry for help I never heard. No. Now it's about setting her free. The afternoon sun slants through the office window, illuminating the dust motes in the air. Somewhere out there, my mother is living with the choices she made. But I'm done living with them. We need a lawyer, I tell Gran. And then we need to find them. The lawyer's office feels too small, too warm. Mr. Patterson spreads Mom's notebook and other documents across his mahogany desk, his expression growing darker with each page he turns. Your mother was thorough, he says finally. These records show a clear pattern of misappropriation. But hangs in the air like smoke. Lionel shifts in his chair beside me. What aren't you telling us? Patterson slides a document forward. This was filed 3 years ago. Your mother gave Victor power of attorney over all your accounts. She signed everything over to him. Legally. The room tilts sideways. She what? There's more. He pulls out another paper. The house was transferred into their joint names last year. Your name isn't on any of it anymore. Marjorie's hand finds mine under the desk. I pull away, standing up so quickly my chair scrapes against the floor. That's impossible. Dad left everything to me. And your mother had legal authority to transfer it all. Patterson's voice is gentle. The question is why? My phone buzzes. A text from Jasper. Found something at the house. Come quick. I have to go, I say, already moving toward the door. Keep looking. There has to be something we can use. 20 minutes later, I'm back in Victor's office. Jasper stands at the desk, holding a USB drive. It was taped under the drawer. Look at this. He plugs it into his laptop. Video files pop up, dozens of them. Security camera footage. The first one shows Mom in Victor's office, tears streaming down her face as she signs papers. Sign it, Serafina. Victor's voice is soft, reasonable. Unless you want the police to know about Phoenix. Mom's hand shakes. Please, Victor. She's just a child. A child who deserves to know what kind of person her mother really is, don't you think? What's Phoenix? Jasper types it into the search bar. More files appear, newspaper clippings, police reports. My breath catches as I read the headlines. A fire, I whisper. At Dad's office. The night he died. Gaya. Jasper starts, but I'm already reading. The investigation ruled it accidental. But these documents, hidden copies of insurance papers, emails between Mom and someone named Marcus, tell a different story. Dad's life insurance policy, doubled just weeks before. Mom's desperate texts about needing money for medical bills, my medical bills from when I was sick as a kid. She did it, I say, my voice hollow. She needed the money and Victor must have found out. Jasper's voice is careful, measured. That's how he controls her. My phone rings. Gran's number. They found them, she says without preamble. Your mother and Victor. They're in Vegas. Of course they are. Where else would a gambling addict go? There's something else, Gran continues. Victor's been making withdrawals. Large ones. If they haven't already burned through what's left. I look at the frozen video frame of my mother's tear-stained face, then at the evidence of her greatest sin. The sin she committed for me. I'm going to Vegas, I say. Kaya, no. They took everything, Gran. And now I know why. My voice sounds strange, distant. Mom's not Victor's victim. She's his accomplice. And it's time they both faced what they've done. Jasper closes his laptop. I'm coming with you. No. I grab the USB drive. I need you to take this to Patterson. Make copies. If anything happens, nothing's going to happen. But we both know that's not true. Because now I understand, really understand, what people will do when they're desperate. What I might do myself. Vegas it is, I say, already planning my next move. Time to call their bluff. The Bellagio's lobby sparkles with artificial brightness, a stark contrast to the darkness I feel inside. I spot them immediately, Mom and Victor at the high-stakes poker table, her hand on his shoulder like everything's normal. Like she didn't help kill Dad. I adjust the USB drive in my pocket, remembering Patterson's words. Be careful. Evidence of criminal conspiracy works both ways. Victor sees me first. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. Well, if it isn't our runaway daughter. Kaya. Mom stands, wobbling slightly. The diamonds at her throat, Dad's diamonds, catch the light. Baby, what are you doing here? Phoenix, I say quietly. The color drains from her face. Victor's hand tightens around his cards. Ring any bells? Let's take this somewhere private, Victor suggests, his voice honey smooth. He leads us to a quiet corner of the hotel bar, ordering drinks like we're just a family having a chat. How much do you want? He asks once we're seated. Want? To keep quiet. About Phoenix, about the money, all of it. Name your price. Mom's hands shake as she reaches for me. Honey, you don't understand. What happened with your father? You mean how you burned down his office for the insurance money? The words taste like poison. While I was in the hospital. While he was working late. I didn't know he was there. The words burst from her like she's been holding them for years. It was supposed to be empty. Marcus promised. Serafina. Victor's warning is soft but clear. I pull out my phone, playing the video of Mom signing away my inheritance. Her face crumples as she watches herself cave to Victor's blackmail. You kept evidence, she whispers. All this time. Like mother, like daughter. I meet Victor's gaze. Except my insurance policy is digital. Copies everywhere. One click and it all goes public. The fire, the fraud, the gambling. Victor's smile turns predatory. You'd send your own mother to prison? You would know all about using family against each other, wouldn't you? Mom stands suddenly, swaying. I need air. Sit down, Victor snaps, but she's already walking away, unsteady on her designer heels. He turns back to me. You have no idea what you're playing with, little girl. Actually, I do. I stand too. Dad's life. My inheritance. Mom's freedom. Isn't that what you've been playing with all along? A security guard approaches our table. Mr. Reynolds, there's a situation with your wife. Victor's face darkens. He follows the guard, leaving me alone with my racing heart and trembling hands. My phone buzzes, Jasper. Patterson found something else, he says without greeting. About the fire. There was a second insurance policy in Victor's name, taken out 3 days before. The pieces click together just as screaming erupts from the direction of the hotel's rooftop bar. I run, following the sound, my heart pounding against my ribs. The elevator feels impossibly slow. I burst onto the roof to find Mom standing at the edge, her arms spread wide, Victor trying to talk her down. The wind whips her hair around her face, and for a moment, she looks young again, like the mom I remember from before Dad died, before Victor, before everything went wrong. Mom! My voice cracks. Please. She turns, tears streaming down her face. I never meant for him to be there, Calla. I swear. But Victor. He knew. He planned. Serafina, don't. Victor's voice holds real fear now. Mom looks at me, then at Victor, then back to the glittering Vegas lights below. I'm so sorry, baby. For everything. She takes a step backward toward the edge, and suddenly I realize that revenge isn't what I wanted at all. Everything happens in slow motion. I lunge forward as Mom steps back, my fingers barely grazing her sleeve. Security guards burst through the door. Victor shouts something I can't hear over the roaring in my ears. Then Mom stumbles, not backward toward the edge, but forward into my arms, collapsing like a puppet with cut strings. She's been drinking, Victor says quickly to the guards. And she took some pills. Shut up. My voice doesn't sound like my own. I cradle Mom's head in my lap as she shivers. Someone call an ambulance. No hospitals, Victor snaps. This is a private matter. Private like Dad's death? The words explode from me. Like the second insurance policy you took out before the fire? Victor goes very still. Mom's eyes flutter open, focusing on him with sudden clarity. What? What second policy? He knew Dad would be working late. I say, watching Victor's facade crack. Didn't he, Mom? That's what you were trying to tell me. The security guards exchange glances, one speaking quietly into his radio. Victor takes a step toward the door, but 2 more guards appear, blocking his exit. I trusted you, Mom whispers, her voice raw. After the fire, when you said you'd protect me. I protected you from prison, Victor snarls. From the truth coming out about what you did. What you made her do. My hands shake as I pull out my phone, showing the video evidence. You needed her desperate enough to sign everything over. To keep quiet when you gambled away my inheritance. Mom struggles to sit up. The pills. In my drink. Mrs. Reynolds needs medical attention, a guard says firmly. And sir, I need you to stay right there. Victor's composure shatters. He lunges, not for the door, but for me. For my phone. I scramble backward, Mom still half in my lap, as he crashes into us. We all go down in a tangle of limbs and screams. My head cracks against the concrete. Through blurring vision, I see Victor wrestling with the guards, Mom crawling toward the edge again. This time when I reach for her, my fingers close around empty air. But she doesn't jump. She pulls herself up using the railing, swaying but determined. You killed him, she says to Victor. You killed James, and then you made me think it was my fault. The elevator dings. Patterson emerges with 2 police officers, holding papers I recognize from the USB drive. Victor Reynolds, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud. I don't hear the rest. The adrenaline drains away, leaving me empty. Mom collapses again, this time into the arms of a paramedic. As they load her onto a stretcher, she reaches for my hand. I'm sorry, she mouths, her eyes already closing. So sorry. I watch them wheel her away, watch the police cuff Victor, watch my whole world implode for the second time in a week. My phone buzzes, Jasper again, probably wondering if I'm okay. I'm not. I don't know if I'll ever be okay again. Miss Martinez? One of the officers approaches. We'll need your statement. I look past him, out over the Vegas lights that suddenly seem harsh and artificial. Somewhere in those lights, my inheritance is scattered like ashes. Somewhere in those lights, the truth about Dad's death festered for years while I blamed the wrong person. Yeah, I say, my voice hollow. I have a statement. I have lots of statements. But as I follow him toward the elevator, I realize revenge doesn't taste like victory. It tastes like blood in my mouth and tears on my face, and the bitter knowledge that sometimes there are no winners, only survivors. The hospital corridor stretches endlessly before me as I make my way to Mom's room. 3 weeks since Vegas. 3 weeks since Victor's arrest. 3 weeks of avoiding this moment. Jasper squeezes my hand. Want me to come in? I shake my head. Through the window, I can see Mom sitting up in bed, looking smaller without her designer clothes and perfect makeup. The doctors say the drugs Victor gave her did some damage, but she'll recover. Physically, at least. I'll wait here, Jasper says. Inside, Mom's reading a magazine. One of those glossy things she used to love. She puts it down when I enter, her hands trembling slightly. The police found most of the money, I say, breaking the silence. What Victor hadn't gambled away. They're returning it to the estate. Gaya. Dad's insurance policy too. The original one, I mean. Not the one Victor took out. She flinches. I didn't know about the second policy. You have to believe. I do. The words surprise us both. That's not why I'm here. I pull out Dad's letter, the one I found in Victor's office. The one dated the day of the fire. Mom's face crumples when she sees the handwriting. He knew, I say quietly. About the medical bills, about how desperate you were. He was working late that night because he was arranging to liquidate his company's shares. To pay for my treatments. Mom covers her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. James, Victor found out somehow. That's why he approached you after the fire, isn't it? Because he knew you'd blame yourself when Dad died trying to save those documents. I never meant, she chokes on the words. Victor said he could protect me, protect you. But he just wanted the money, and I was too afraid to see it. I sit on the edge of her bed, feeling the weight of all our shared grief. Gran told me something yesterday. About karma, and how sometimes it looks like revenge, but really it's just truth finding its way to the surface. Are you? She swallows hard. Are you pressing charges? No. I meet her eyes. But I'm not pretending anymore either. About any of it. She nods slowly, understanding what I'm not saying. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. That love doesn't erase consequences. Your father would be proud of you, she whispers, for being stronger than both of us. I'm not stronger. I search for the right words. More honest, maybe. About what matters. Through the window, I see Jasper talking with Gran and my paternal grandparents, who've become regular fixtures in my life. They're all holding coffee cups, sharing some joke that makes Gran throw back her head laughing. They're your family too, I tell Mom. If you want them to be. After rehab, I mean. She touches the letter in my hands. Do you think? Could I read it? I hesitate, then hand it over. As she reads Dad's last words, I watch her face transform with grief and understanding and something that might be hope. I'd like to try, she says finally. To be better. To be worthy of. She gestures at the window, at the family waiting outside. I stand, smoothing my skirt. That's all any of us can do, right? Try to be worthy of the people who love us. As I turn to leave, she calls out softly. Gaya. Thank you. For choosing truth over revenge. I pause at the door, thinking of all the ways revenge can disguise itself as justice, and all the ways truth can heal what revenge would only break. Yeah, I say. Me too. 6 months later, I stand in front of Dad's old office building, now renovated and ready for its new purpose. The sign reads James Martinez Youth Support Center in clean, simple letters. Behind me, a small crowd gathers for the opening ceremony. He would have loved this, Marjorie says, adjusting the ribbon we're about to cut. Using the inheritance to help other kids facing medical debt. I spot Mom at the edge of the crowd, looking healthier after completing rehab. She catches my eye and gives a small wave, not presuming to come closer. We're still finding our way back to each other, one careful step at a time. Jasper appears with the scissors. Ready. Wait. I pull out the letter, Dad's last letter, from my pocket. I've read it so many times the creases are soft as fabric. I want to read something first. The crowd quiets as I unfold the paper. My dearest Calla, I begin, my voice steady. By the time you read this, I'll have secured the funds for your treatment. No child should have to worry about money when they're fighting to survive. No parent should have to choose between saving their child and saving their soul. I pause, looking at Mom. Her eyes shine with tears, but she stands straight, accepting the weight of those words. Whatever happens, I continue, remember that true wealth isn't in bank accounts or property deeds. It's in the choices we make when everything seems lost. Choose compassion over revenge, understanding over anger. Choose to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. Lionel squeezes my shoulder. In the crowd, I see Gran dabbing her eyes with a tissue. You are my greatest legacy, Calla. Not my money or my business, but your heart, your resilience, your capacity for forgiveness. The last word catches in my throat. I fold the letter, tucking it away as Jasper hands me the scissors. Dad wrote that the night of the fire, I tell the crowd. He never got to give me the letter, but he gave me something better. He showed me what it means to turn pain into purpose. I cut the ribbon. Applause breaks out, but I barely hear it. I'm watching Mom slip away from the crowd, heading toward her car. Go, Gran whispers. Some cycles need to end with a beginning. I catch up to Mom in the parking lot. You don't have to leave. She turns, surprise flickering across her face. I thought, after everything, Dad was right, I say. About breaking cycles. About choices. I hold out my hand. Stay. Help me run the center. Show other families there's a way out besides desperation. She stares at my outstretched hand like it might burn her. How can you still want me in your life? Because you kept track, I say simply. All those years, you documented everything Victor did. Part of you was always fighting back, trying to protect me in your own way. I should have fought harder. We both should have done a lot of things differently. I keep my hand extended. But Dad also wrote about second chances. About choosing what happens next. Slowly, hesitantly, she takes my hand. Behind us, people are filing into the center, carrying hopes and fears as heavy as the ones we once carried. Maybe still carry. What happens next? She asks softly. I think about revenge, about justice, about how sometimes they're the same thing and sometimes they're opposites. I think about Dad's letter, about cycles breaking and healing beginning. We help people, I say. And we remember that the best revenge against darkness is creating light. Together, we walk back toward the center, toward whatever comes next, carrying our scars like medals of survival, and our hope like a torch to light the way forward.
The attic always smelled like memories, musty photo albums, and forgotten perfume bottles that still held traces of Mom. I hadn't planned on spending my Saturday afternoon up here, but Dad's announcement about decluttering sent me scrambling to salvage what I could before Serafina got her hands on our past. That's when I found the video camera. The small screen flickered to life, and suddenly Mom was there, sitting in our old rocking chair. Her dark hair was shorter than I remembered, but her smile, God, her smile hadn't changed at all in my memory. "Sweet dreams, my little star," she sang, her voice slightly scratchy through the tiny speaker. The lullaby she'd sung to me every night until I was 12. Until she couldn't anymore. "Callie, are you up there?" Serafina's voice carried through the floorboards, syrupy sweet as always. I quickly pressed pause, my heart pounding. "Just organizing some things," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, your father wants to discuss the renovation plans over dinner. Don't be too long." I waited until her footsteps faded before pressing play again. But instead of the lullaby continuing, the video jumped to a different scene. Mom was alone in her study, looking directly into the camera. "Kelly, if you're watching this..." She paused, tucking her hair behind her ear, a gesture I'd inherited. "I need you to know something. There's a letter in my old jewelry box, the blue one with the silver clasp. I hope you never need to read it, but if things..." She glanced over her shoulder, then back at the camera. "If things aren't what they seem, you'll find what you need to know there." The video ended abruptly. My hands shook as I rewound it, watching that last part again. Mom had recorded this message knowing she was sick, knowing she might not be here. But what did she mean about things not being what they seem? I scrambled through the boxes until I found the jewelry box. It was exactly where she said it would be, wedged between her old yearbooks and a stack of birthday cards. The silver clasp had tarnished, but it opened with a soft click. Inside, beneath a tangle of costume jewelry, was an envelope with my name written in Mom's elegant handwriting. Before I could open it, voices drifted up from below. The attic will make a perfect nursery once we clear out all this. Serafina's voice grew closer. The light up here is gorgeous. I don't know, Dad replied. Callie might not. Emmett, we talked about this. Changes are necessary for healing. You can't keep living in a shrine to Laurel. I shoved the letter into my pocket just as their footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Dad appeared first, his face brightening when he saw me. Hey, kiddo. Find anything interesting? I forced a smile, acutely aware of the letter burning against my leg. Just some old photos. Serafina appeared behind him, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. Oh, we should go through those together. Make a proper album of the best ones before we clear everything out. Clear everything out? I echoed. Well, with a baby coming. She patted her still flat stomach meaningfully. We need to make room for new memories too. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. I clutched Mom's video camera tighter, my fingernails digging into the plastic. Right, I said. New memories. Later, alone in my room, I pulled out Mom's letter. The envelope was sealed with wax, a detail so perfectly Mom it made my throat tight. Whatever she needed to tell me, whatever she was worried about, it was important enough to hide. Important enough to make sure I'd find it. I broke the seal. Mom's letter trembled in my hands as I read it for the 10th time. Her warnings about protecting what matters and watching for signs seemed cryptic at first, but after this morning's breakfast announcement, everything clicked into horrible focus. We're getting married. Serafina had practically sung the words, flashing her diamond ring while Dad beamed beside her. And that's not all. We're renovating the entire house. A fresh start for our new family. Now, sitting in my usual spot at Luca's coffee shop, I could barely keep my hands steady enough to hold my cup. She's already talking about painting over Mom's mural in the living room, I told him. The one Mom spent months working on when she was sick. Luca leaned across the counter, his dark eyes serious. That's messed up. What did your dad say? Nothing. He just nodded along like some puppet. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. He doesn't even see what she's doing. Which is what, exactly? Erasing Mom. Piece by piece. I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos I'd taken of the attic boxes. Look at these labels. Donate. Trash. Storage. She's already sorting through our memories like they're yard sale items. The bell above the door chimed, and Serafina herself walked in, wearing that perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. I quickly shoved my phone away. Callie, sweetheart. I thought I might find you here. She approached the counter, her heels clicking against the tile. I need your help with something special. I'm kind of busy. It's about the wedding. She placed her hand on my arm, her grip just tight enough to make me uncomfortable. I want you to be my maid of honor. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. What? Wouldn't it be perfect? A symbol of our families truly becoming one. Her voice dropped lower, meant just for me. Your father would be so happy. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Please say yes. It would mean everything to me. Of course he was in on this. I looked at Luca, who was pretending to clean the espresso machine while obviously listening. Can I think about it? Something flickered behind Serafina's smile. Of course, darling. But don't take too long. We're announcing the wedding party at dinner tonight. The whole family will be there, even your grandmother Edna. My head snapped up. Gran's coming. Oh, didn't your father tell you? I invited her specially. Serafina adjusted her designer purse. She was so touched to be included. It's been what, 6 months since you've seen her? 8 months, actually. Ever since Serafina had convinced Dad that Gran's negative energy about their relationship wasn't healthy for anyone. Well, I should run. So many details to arrange. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Callie? That lovely blue dress you wore to your mother's memorial? It would be perfect for the engagement party. After she left, Luca let out a low whistle. Wow, that was strategic. I finished, my mind racing. She's using Gran to pressure me. And that comment about Mom's memorial dress? She's trying to prove she can touch anything, even the most painful parts of our past. So, what are you going to do? I pulled out Mom's letter again, focusing on the last line. Sometimes the best defense is to let them think they've won. I'm going to say yes, I said, a plan already forming. I'm going to be the perfect maid of honor. And then I'm going to figure out exactly what she's hiding. Callie, Luca's voice held a warning. You didn't see what else I found in the attic, Luca. I reached into my bag, pulling out a small notebook I discovered hidden behind Mom's jewelry box. I think Mom knew something about Serafina. Something big. The engagement dinner felt like a carefully orchestrated performance, with Serafina as both director and star. Gran sat across from me, her fingers nervously twisting her wedding ring, a habit Mom used to have too. When she caught my eye, she gave me a slight nod that spoke volumes. A toast, Serafina announced, rising from her seat. To family, both old and new. Her eyes lingered on me. And to Callie, who's agreed to be my maid of honor. The clinking of glasses couldn't mask the whispers. I caught fragments. After everything, the therapy sessions. Unstable since her mother. My fork clattered against the plate. What therapy sessions? The room went silent. Dad shifted uncomfortably, while Serafina's perfect smile never wavered. Oh, darling, she said, her voice dripping with concern. We don't need to discuss that here. Everyone understands you're still processing your grief. What are you talking about? I turned to Dad. What has she been telling people? Callie, Dad started, but Serafina touched his arm, silencing him. I've only shared what Dr. Matthews told us, she said. About your episodes. The ones where you imagine I'm trying to replace your mother. The room spun. Dr. Matthews? I've never seen a Dr. Matthews. See. Serafina's whisper carried just far enough for the closest guests to hear. The denial is part of the pattern. Gran's chair scraped back. That's enough, Serafina. Edna, please. This is exactly why we've had to limit your visits. Your enabling only makes things worse. I stood up so quickly my water glass toppled, spreading across the pristine tablecloth like a stain. You're the reason Gran stopped coming? Callie, Dad's voice held a warning. Sit down. No. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking. You want to talk about patterns? Let's talk about Mom's notebook. The one where she wrote about running into you 3 years before she died, when you were using a different name. Serafina's smile flickered. I don't know what you're. Rachel Wilson. That was your name then, wasn't it? When you worked at the hospital where Mom was getting treatment. The color drained from her face. Callie, stop this, Dad demanded, but I could see uncertainty creeping into his expression. Mom wrote everything down. How you accessed her medical records, how you… That's enough. Serafina's mask cracked. She turned to Dad, tears welling up. Do you see what I mean? These delusional accusations. They're not delusions. Gran's voice cut through the chaos. She pulled out a folded paper from her purse. I have the hospital records right here. Rachel Wilson was fired for unauthorized access to patient files, including Laurel's. The silence that followed was deafening. Serafina's tears vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. Emmett, she said, her voice hard. Take your daughter upstairs. Now. But Dad didn't move. He was staring at the hospital records in Gran's hands. I think, he said slowly, you're the one who needs to leave, Serafina. She laughed, but it was brittle. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for this family? You mean everything you've done to this family? I corrected, finally seeing her clearly. How long were you watching us? Planning this. Serafina's composure shattered completely. She grabbed her purse, nearly knocking over her chair. You ungrateful little… She caught herself, aware of the audience. Fine. But don't think this is over. As she stormed out, I noticed something had fallen from her purse. A small key with a familiar blue tassel, the same one missing from Mom's jewelry box. I picked it up, remembering Mom's words about things not being what they seemed. Whatever secrets that key unlocked, whatever truth Serafina was hiding, I was going to find out. But first, I had to deal with Dad, who looked like his whole world had just crumbled. Again. The key burned in my pocket as I watched Dad pack Serafina's things into boxes. 3 days since the dinner, and he still moved like a sleepwalker, mechanical and distant. When he picked up her framed photo from his nightstand, his hands trembled. "I found something else," I said, breaking the heavy silence. "In Mom's old study." He didn't look up. "Callie, I can't. Not right now. It's about the hospital records." I pulled out the stack of papers Gran had helped me gather. Serafina, Rachel, whatever her name is, she didn't just access Mom's files. She accessed yours too. That got his attention. "What?" "Your medical history, insurance information, financial records." My voice caught. "Everything someone would need to target you." The frame slipped from his hands, glass shattering across the hardwood floor. Among the shards, I noticed something odd. A second photo behind the first, partially visible through the broken glass. Dad saw it too. He knelt down, carefully pulling it free. His face went ash-white. "Dad, this is impossible," he whispered. "This photo, it's from your mother's last art show. But Serafina, she wasn't there. We didn't meet until..." But there she was, lurking in the background, watching our family with calculated interest. 2 years before she'd supposedly run into Dad at the grocery store. 2 years before their chance meeting. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Ask your father about the life insurance policy." "What life insurance policy?" I asked. Dad's expression crumpled. "How did you..." "Dad." He sank onto the bed. "Your mother's policy. There were complications with the payout. Serafina, she works in insurance, said she could help expedite things." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "She engineered everything. Meeting you, helping with the claim." "Miss me already?" Serafina's voice cut through the room like ice. She stood in the doorway, wearing the same perfect smile that had fooled us for so long. "Oh, don't look so surprised. Did you really think a little key and some old hospital records would be enough to get rid of me?" "Get out," I said, stepping between her and Dad. "Gladly. Once I get what I came for." She pulled out a folder. "Emmett, darling, remember those papers you signed last week? The ones about updating the house deed." Dad went even paler. "You said those were for the renovation permits." "Did I?" Her smile widened. "You really should read things more carefully, especially documents that transfer property ownership." "You can't," I started, but she cut me off. "I already have. This house, the insurance money, everything, it's mine now. Legally binding." She glanced at her watch. "You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." "Like hell we do," I snapped, but Dad's next word stopped me cold. "She's right." His voice was hollow. "I signed everything over. I didn't even read." Serafina blew us a kiss. "I'll send movers for my things tomorrow. Do try to be gone by then." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Callie? Your mother's studio? I think it'll make a lovely home gym." After she left, I pulled out Mom's key with the blue tassel. Whatever was behind this, whatever she was really after, the answer had to be in Mom's old files. We had 24 hours to find it. "Dad," I said, watching him stare at the broken picture frame, "I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning. No more secrets." He nodded slowly, and for the first time since Mom died, I saw a spark of his old strength return. "Where do you want to start?" Mom's study remained exactly as she'd left it, a time capsule of half-finished paintings and coffee-stained notebooks. We had less than 18 hours before Serafina's deadline, and somewhere in this room lay the truth she'd tried so hard to hide. "The key is to fit something in here," I said, running my fingers along the spines of old journals. Dad stood in the doorway, unable to cross the threshold he'd avoided for 3 years. "Your mother spent hours in here that last month," he said quietly. I thought she was working on her final collection, but the sound of a car door slamming made us both jump. Through the window, I watched Serafina escort a well-dressed man toward the house. "That's James Morton," Dad's voice cracked. "My investment advisor. The one who suggested the life insurance policy?" Before he could answer, voices drifted up from below. "Everything's proceeding as planned," Serafina was saying. "Once we liquidate the assets." I turned to Dad. "Assets? What assets?" His face went slack. "The art collection. Your mother's paintings. They're worth—" "How much?" "Nearly 2 million. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Mom's art had always been valuable, but this was different. This was why Serafina had pushed so hard to control the house, why she'd tried to isolate us from Gran and anyone else who might ask questions. The blue-tasseled key caught the light, and suddenly I remembered something: Mom's old filing cabinet. The one she'd kept locked because it held her contracts and sales records. My hands shook as I tried the key. It clicked. Inside, beneath stacks of gallery receipts, lay a sealed envelope addressed to the insurance adjuster. I tore it open, scanning the contents. With each line, my blood ran colder. "Dad," I whispered. "Mom knew." "Knew what?" "About the fraud. About Serafina, Rachel, whatever her name is. She's done this before. Multiple times. She targets artists, grieving families." My voice caught. Mom was investigating her. That's why Serafina needed access to her medical records. She needed to know how much time she had left. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Dad quickly pulled me away from the cabinet, just as Serafina appeared in the doorway. "How touching," she said, taking in the scene. A family reunion in the shrine of dear, departed Laurel. Her eyes fixed on the open filing cabinet. "Finding anything interesting?" "Just memories," I said, slipping the letter into my back pocket. "Though I'm sure you'll turn this into your home gym soon enough." "Oh, sweetheart." She stepped closer, her perfume suffocating. "I have much bigger plans than that. Your mother's entire collection goes up for auction next week. I already have buyers lined up." "You can't." "I can. And I will." She turned to Dad. "James is waiting downstairs. There are some final papers to sign." Dad straightened, something of his old strength returning.
No.
"No." Her smile turned razor-sharp. "Need I remind you what happens if you don't cooperate? How quickly rumors spread about unstable teenagers and negligent fathers." I felt Dad flinch beside me, but before either of us could respond, a small voice piped up from the hallway. "Mommy?" Jasper stood there in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching a familiar sketchbook. "I found this in your room. The lady in the pictures looks like you, but the name is different." Serafina's mask slipped for just a moment, real fear flashing across her face. Because in Jasper's hands was Mom's research notebook, the one containing evidence of every identity Serafina had ever stolen, every family she'd destroyed. And now we had proof. Serafina moved faster than any of us expected. Within seconds, she'd snatched the notebook from Jasper's hands, shoving him aside with enough force to make him stumble. Dad lunged to catch him, leaving me alone facing Serafina's rage. "You really are your mother's daughter," she snarled, all pretense of charm vanishing. "Always digging where you don't belong." "Mom figured out what you were," I said, backing toward the filing cabinet. "That's why you needed her medical records. You needed to know if she'd live long enough to expose you." Her laugh was hollow. "Laurel was already dying. I just expedited things." The world stopped. "What did you do?" "Insurance companies are so particular about medication records." She leafed through Mom's notebook, her smile growing colder. "One small discrepancy in her prescriptions, and suddenly her policy becomes contestable. Stress like that can be devastating for terminal patients." Dad's voice cracked. You changed her medications?" "I did what was necessary." She pulled out her phone. "Now, unless you want Jasper's custody arrangement to become very complicated, you'll sign these final papers, Emmett." "Don't," I pleaded, but Dad's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I have to protect him," he whispered. "Dad, she killed Mom?" "Allegedly," Serafina corrected, striking a match. "But good luck proving anything without this." The notebook caught fire, pages curling into ash. "Now, about those papers?" A small voice piped up from the doorway. "I took pictures." We all turned. Jasper stood there, holding my phone, his dinosaur pajamas glowing in the dark hallway. "What?" Serafina's mask slipped completely. "The pretty pictures in the book," he said. "I sent them to Callie's phone, like you taught me with your iPad." For one beautiful moment, triumph surged through me. Then Serafina's face transformed into something terrible. "Delete them," she commanded, advancing on me. "Now." "They're already backed up to the cloud." I bluffed, praying she couldn't tell I was lying. "Everyone will know what you did." She moved with startling speed, grabbing my arm and twisting until pain shot through my shoulder. "Delete them, or your brother learns what happens to people who cross me." "Let her go." Dad stepped forward, but Serafina's grip only tightened. "The papers first, Emmett. Sign them, or your daughter joins her mother in whatever tragic accident comes next." My phone clattered to the floor as she twisted harder. Through tears of pain, I watched Dad pick up the pen with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered, beginning to sign. In that moment, I saw our future unraveling. Dad broken, Jasper trapped, Mom's killer triumphant. All because I'd pushed too hard, too fast. Because I'd thought having evidence would be enough. The sound of sirens cut through the night. "That would be the police." Gran's voice rang from the stairs. I called them the moment I saw James Morton's car. "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize him from the fraud warnings I've been tracking?" Serafina's grip loosened just enough. I twisted free, diving for my phone. She lunged after me, but Dad finally moved, stepping between us. "It's over," he said. "Nothing's over," Serafina spat, backing toward the window. "You have no proof. No evidence. Just the ramblings of a grieving family and a disturbed teenager." She was right. The notebook was ashes, and I hadn't actually backed up Jasper's photos. We had nothing except, "We have Mom's letter to the insurance adjuster," I realized aloud. "The one that's been sitting in their fraud department for 3 years, waiting for someone to connect the dots." Serafina's face went white as red and blue lights flooded the room. Sometimes I thought, watching her mask finally shatter completely, the best revenge isn't what you do. It's what you make others do to themselves. The interrogation room felt smaller with each passing hour. Through the one-way glass, I watched Serafina maintain her composure as detectives cycled through, her answers practiced and precise. She'd done this before, many times. "We need more than circumstantial evidence," Detective Morris said, spreading photos across the table. "Different names, different faces, all Serafina. She's too good at covering her tracks." Dad sat with his head in his hands. "I let her into our lives. I let her near my children." "Not your fault," Gran said firmly, but I barely heard them. Something about the photos nagged at me, a pattern I couldn't quite grasp. My phone buzzed, a text from Luca. "Check your email. Now." The surveillance footage he'd recovered from the coffee shop loaded slowly. There was Serafina weeks ago having what looked like a casual conversation with James Morton. But with the volume increased, their words became clear. "Once the art sold, we split it 50-50, she was saying. "Just like the others." Morton's response chilled me. "And the boy. Jasper's my insurance. Emmett won't risk losing him." I replayed it, hands shaking. "Detective Morris? I need you to look at something." But Serafina's voice cut through the room. "I want to speak with Callie. Alone." Everyone protested, but I was already moving toward the interrogation room. This ended now.